The space station called Harmony Ring floated in the darkness between stars. It circled a small gray moon that belonged to no one. This made it the perfect place for aliens from many worlds to meet and talk. 37 different species sent their representatives here. They came to make deals, sign treaties, and try not to start wars. Aileen Parks stood at the window of her small room and watched the stars. She was 28 years old, with short black hair and tired eyes. Back on Earth, in the city of Bizan, her mother was probably watering the garden right now. Her father was probably feeding the chickens. Aileen missed the smell of rain on warm soil. She missed the sound of her grandmother singing old songs in the kitchen. But she had a job to do. Aileen was a junior ambassador from Earth. This was her first assignment in space. Her boss, Ambassador Dio Kim, had been working with aliens for 15 years. He knew how to smile without showing teeth, because many species saw teeth as a threat. He knew how to bow at exactly the right angle for each culture. He knew which species could shake hands and which ones would die if they touched human skin. Aileen knew none of these things. She was here to learn, to watch, and to stay out of trouble. The station was huge. It had sections for every type of alien. Some areas were hot, filled with steam and the smell of sulfur. Some were cold, covered in ice and darkness. Some had no air at all, because certain species breathed poison that would kill everyone else. The human section was small and plain. It had normal air, normal temperature, and simple food. Most aliens thought humans were boring. They were wrong, but they did not know it yet. Aileen spent her days in the translation office. She sat at a metal desk and worked with words. Languages were her gift. On Earth, she had spoken Korean, English, Japanese, and Mandarin. Now she was learning alien tongues. The clicking speech of the insect-like Kreth, the musical whistles of the water-dwelling Sonari, the deep rumbles of the stone creatures called Mordeth. Her co-workers were a mixed group. There was Unichoi, a cheerful woman from Seoul who handled communications. There was Junho Lee, a nervous young man who managed supplies and schedules. And there was Ambassador Kim himself, who carried the weight of representing all humanity on his thin shoulders. None of them were soldiers. None of them were heroes. They were just ordinary people doing ordinary work in an extraordinary place. One morning, the news came through the station like a cold wind. The Velith were coming. Aileen did not know much about the Velith. She pulled up the information files on her screen and began to read. What she learned made her skin feel cold. The Velith came from a frozen world at the edge of known space. They were predators, hunters. They stood 7 feet tall, with bodies covered in thick gray fur. Their eyes were the color of melted copper, and they glowed in the dark. They had claws that could cut through metal and teeth that could crack bone. For 300 years, the Velith had avoided contact with other species. They saw themselves as superior. They did not need friends or allies. They took what they wanted and left, but something had changed. Their frozen world was dying. The ice was melting, the prey animals were disappearing, and the Velith needed help. So they had finally agreed to come to Harmony Ring and talk. Ambassador Kim called a meeting in the human section. "Listen carefully," he said. His face was serious. "The Velith are dangerous. They are not evil, but they are not gentle either. They come from a world where weakness means death. They will test us. They will watch for any sign that we are afraid." Yuna raised her hand. "What do we do if they threaten us?" "We stay calm," Kim said. "We do not run. We do not fight. We show them that humans are not prey." Junho looked pale. "And if they attack?" Kim was quiet for a moment. "Then we hope the station security arrives in time." No one laughed. The Velith ship arrived 3 days later. It was a dark, angular thing, like a knife made of shadow. It docked at the far end of the station, and the Velith walked out in a single line. Aileen watched from a viewing platform. She stood behind Ambassador Kim, trying to be invisible. The Velith moved like ghosts. Their feet made no sound. Their copper eyes scanned everything, missing nothing. They wore no clothes, because their thick fur protected them from cold. They carried no visible weapons, because their bodies were weapons enough. At the front of the group walked their leader. He was older than the others, with scars crossing his muzzle and one ear torn short. His name, according to the files, was Roth. He had led his people for 40 years. He had killed more enemies than anyone could count. Behind the adults came something unexpected. 3 small figures. Cubs. Aileen felt her heart soften. The cubs were barely waist-high to the adults. Their fur was fluffier, their eyes bigger, their movements clumsy and curious. They looked around the station with wonder, sniffing the air. Pawing at the walls, warning messages began, appearing on every screen in the station. Attention all species. Velith. Cubs are present. Do not approach. Do not make eye contact. Do not run. Cubs are unpredictable and dangerous. Their instincts are not yet controlled. Junho read the message and turned even paler. They brought children? Dangerous children? Ambassador Kim nodded slowly. The Velith never separate families. It is their most sacred law. Where the adults go, the cubs go. Yuna frowned. But if the cubs are dangerous, why bring them to a diplomatic mission? Because, Kim said, refusing to bring them would shame the family. And among the Velith, shame is worse than death. Aileen watched the cubs tumble over each other as they walked. One of them stalked to scratch at a floor panel. Another tried to bite a wall decoration. The third simply sat down and refused to move until an adult picked it up. They were cute. There was no other word for it. Despite the warnings, despite the danger, Aileen thought they were the cutest things she had ever seen. She did not say this out loud. She was not stupid, but she filed the thought away in her mind. Like a seed waiting for spring, the Velith settled into their section of the station. The other species kept their distance. Meetings were scheduled. Documents were prepared, and everyone waited to see what would happen next. Aileen returned to her translation work. She learned the basic words of the Velith language. Hello, goodbye, peace, war, hunt, family. She did not know that the universe was about to teach everyone a lesson. She did not know that it would start with her. The news spread through Harmony Ring like fire through dry grass. Within 1 hour, every species on the station knew what had happened. Within 2 hours, the story had been sent to 12 different homeworlds. Within 3 hours, scientists and scholars were pulling up old files about humans, trying to understand what they had witnessed. A human had touched Velith cubs. A human had held Velith cubs. A human had let Velith cubs sleep on her body, like she was their mother, and she had not died. Aileen did not understand why everyone was so surprised. She had grown up on a farm. She had held baby goats and sleeping puppies and angry kittens that scratched her arms. She had once rescued a baby bird that fell from its nest and kept it warm in her hands until it was strong enough to fly. To her, the Velith cubs were just another type of baby animal. Furry, warm, and in need of comfort. But the galaxy did not see it that way. The Velith cubs had stayed with Aileen for 3 hours. Roth had watched the entire time, standing like a gray statue near the table. Other Velith adults had come and gone, their copper eyes wide with disbelief. The cubs had woken up, eaten scraps from Eileen's plate, played with her fingers, and then fallen asleep again. When they finally left, carried away by their parents, they had looked back at Aileen and made small crying sounds. They did not want to go. They wanted to stay with the warm human who smelled like safety and comfort. Ambassador Kim called a meeting that evening. His face was pale, and his hand shook slightly as he poured himself a cup of water. "Do you understand what you did today?" he asked Aileen. She shook her head. "I helped some lost children. That is all." Kim laughed, but there was no humor in it. "That is not all. The Velith are one of the most feared species in the galaxy. Their cubs are considered wild and dangerous. Even other Velith adults are careful around young ones. And you just let them climb on you like you were a piece of furniture." Yuna nodded eagerly. "Every other species on the station is talking about it. The Krath think you might be some kind of secret weapon. The Sinari think you might be mentally unstable. The Mordith think you might be a goddess in disguise." Junho made a nervous sound. "And the Velith think you might be the answer to their problems." Aileen frowned. "What problems?" Kim sat down heavily in his chair. He looked older than he had this morning. "The Velith homeworld is dying. Their ice is melting, their prey is disappearing, and their population is declining. They have a hard time raising their young because their world is too unstable. Cubs are dying from cold, from hunger, from accidents." He paused and looked directly at Aileen. "And today, 3 of their cubs chose you over their own parents. They slept more peacefully on your lap than they have slept in months. The Velith parents were watching. They saw everything." Aileen felt a cold feeling in her stomach. "What does that mean?" "It means," Kim said slowly, "that the Velith delegation has changed their priorities. They came here to negotiate trade agreements and territorial boundaries. Now they want to negotiate something else entirely." "What?" Kim smiled tiredly. "They want to know if humans would be willing to help raise Velith cubs." The room went silent. Aileen stared at her boss. She was not sure if she had heard him correctly. "They want us to be babysitters? For alien predator children?" "Not exactly," Yuna said. She pulled up a data file on her screen. "They want to send some of their cubs to human space, to live with human families, to be raised in warm environments where they can grow strong and healthy." Junho shook his head in disbelief. "That is insane. Velith cubs are dangerous. They have claws and teeth. They could hurt human children." "The Velith know that," Kim said. "They are not stupid. They are proposing a careful program. Selected families, proper training, safety measures. But the basic idea is the same. They believe that human warmth and human kindness might be exactly what their cubs need." Aileen thought about the cub that had slept in her lap. She remembered the small snoring sounds it made, the way its tiny paws twitched as it dreamed. She remembered the feeling of its warm body pressed against her stomach. "Why me?" she asked quietly. "Why did they choose me?" Kim shrugged. "You were warm. You were calm. You did not run. You did not scream. You did not attack. You just accepted them. That is exactly what Velith cubs need. Someone who does not treat them like monsters." The next few days were strange for Aileen. She continued her translation work, but she also became a kind of celebrity on the station. Species that had ignored humans for years now stopped to stare at her in the corridors. Some of them bowed. Some of them ran away. Some of them tried to touch her, as if she might have magical powers. Roth visited her several times. He brought gifts of dried meat and strange crystals from his homeworld. He sat across from her in the dining hall and asked her questions about Earth. "Your world has many prey animals?" he asked one day. Aileen nodded. "We call them pets. Dogs, cats, horses, birds. We bring them into our homes and treat them like family." Roth tilted his scarred head. "You hunt with them?" "Some humans do, but most of us just love them. We feed them, play with them, and take care of them when they are sick." "Why?" Aileen thought about it. "Because it makes us happy. Because they trust us and depend on us. because taking care of something small and helpless makes us feel like we are doing something good in the universe. Roth was silent for a long moment. His copper eyes stared at her with an intensity that should have been frightening. "My cubs trust you," he said finally. "They have never trusted anyone outside our family, not even other Velith. But they trust you, I know. Do you understand what that means to us?" Aileen met his eyes without fear. "I think I am beginning to understand." Roth nodded slowly. Then he did something that made every other species in the dining hall gasp with shock. He lowered his head until his forehead touched the table in front of Aileen. It was a Velith gesture of deep respect, a gesture that was only given to those who had saved lives. "You have given my cubs something they have never had," he said quietly. "Safety, warmth, peace. For that I will owe you a debt until the stars themselves grow cold." Aileen did not know what to say, so she simply reached out and placed her small, warm hand on top of Roth's scarred head. "You are welcome," she said softly. "That is what humans do. We take care of those who need us, even if they have claws and teeth." Roth made a sound deep in his chest. It might have been a laugh. It might have been a sob. Even he did not seem to know. But when he raised his head, his copper eyes were shining with something that looked very much like hope. The treaty was signed on the 7th day dot. It was not a normal treaty. Normal treaties were signed in conference rooms with formal language and careful ceremonies. This treaty was signed in the dining hall of Harmony Ring, at the same small table where everything had begun. Aileen sat in her usual chair. The 3 Velith cubs were piled on her lap, sleeping peacefully. Their small bodies rose and fell with each breath, and their tiny paws twitched as they dreamed of hunting and playing, and running through snow that no longer existed on their dying world. Roth sat across from her. Ambassador Kim stood beside him, holding the document that would change the relationship between 2 species forever. "This is unusual," Kim said carefully. "Treaties are normally signed in the council chamber." Roth made a rumbling sound that might have been a laugh. "Your council chambers are cold and empty. This table is warm and full of life. This is where my cubs found peace. This is where the alliance should begin." Kim looked at Aileen. She shrugged slightly, careful not to wake the sleeping cubs. "He has a point," she said. Kim sighed. Then he smiled. "Very well. Let us make history in a dining hall." The signing was simple. Kim pressed his thumb to the document, leaving a human fingerprint. Roth extended one claw and cut a small mark into the paper, leaving a thin line of blood. In Velith culture, blood was the seal of any important promise. It meant that the promise was backed by life itself. When it was done, the document was photographed, copied, and sent to 1,000 different worlds. The first formal alliance between humanity and the Velith had been created, not through war or conquest or threats, but through warmth and kindness and 3 small cubs who had been cold and afraid. The news spread quickly. On Earth, people celebrated in the streets. The Velith were famous throughout the galaxy as fierce warriors and dangerous predators. An alliance with them meant that humanity was finally being taken seriously as a galactic power. But on the station, the celebration was quieter. Yuna brought a bottle of rice wine from the human supplies. Junho found some dried fruit that was almost edible. Roth contributed a container of frozen meat that the humans politely declined to eat. And Aileen provided the most important ingredient of all. She sang. It was an old Korean song that her grandmother had taught her. A lullaby about mountains and rivers and children sleeping under the stars. Her voice was not beautiful, but it was warm and gentle and full of love. The Velith adults stopped moving when they heard it. Their copper eyes grew soft and distant. Even Roth, the scarred warrior who had killed more enemies than he could count, sat perfectly still and listened up. When the song ended, there was silence. "What was that?" Roth asked quietly. "A lullaby," Aileen said. "We sing them to our children when they are afraid or tired. The words do not matter. What matters is the voice, the feeling, the promise that someone is there, watching over them." Roth looked at the cubs sleeping in her lap. "My mate used to sing to our cubs before she died, before the ice melted and the prey disappeared. She would hold them close and make sounds that were almost like music." His voice grew rough. "I have not heard those sounds in many years. I had forgotten what they felt like." Aileen reached across the table and placed her small hand on his massive paw. "Then let me teach you some of our songs. You can sing them to your cubs when I am not there." Roth stared at her. For a moment, he looked like he might cry. But Veleth did not cry. Their eyes simply grew brighter, like copper flames burning in the darkness. "You would do that?" he asked. "Of course," Aileen said. "That is what friends do." The weeks that followed were busy ones. The alliance required planning and organization. Families on Earth needed to be selected and trained. Safety protocols needed to be established. Cultural exchange programs needed to be designed. Aileen was at the center of all of it. She did not want to be. She was just a translator, a quiet farm girl who preferred books to meetings. But the Veleth trusted her in a way that they trusted no other human. When she spoke, they listened. When she suggested changes, they agreed. Ambassador Kim watched with amazement. "You have become more powerful than any diplomat in human history," he told her one evening. "The Veleth would follow you into battle if you asked them to." Aileen shook her head. "I do not want power. I just want to help. That is why they trust you. You have no ambition, no hidden motives. You simply care about their cubs. And to the Veleth, that is the most valuable thing in the universe." The day came when Aileen had to leave Harmony Ring. Her assignment was over. She was being sent back to Earth to help establish the first Veleth Human Exchange Center. The cubs did not understand. They clung to her legs and made crying sounds that broke her heart. Their parents stood nearby, watching with eyes that showed both gratitude and sorrow. Roth stepped forward. In his massive paws, he held a small object. It was a crystal, dark blue, and glowing faintly with inner light. "This is a memory stone," he said. "It holds the song of our family. Every hunt, every victory, every loss. Our history is stored within it." He pressed it into Eileen's hands. "I am giving it to you, so that you will always carry a piece of us with you, and so that my cubs will know, wherever they are, that you are still part of our family." Eileen's eyes filled with tears. She had been trying to stay strong, trying to be professional, trying to act like a proper diplomat. But she was not a diplomat. She was just a girl who loved animals and wanted to help. "Thank you," she whispered. "I will treasure it always." She knelt down and hugged each of the cubs in turn. They pressed their furry faces against her neck and made small purring sounds. "I will see you again," she promised. "I will come to visit. And when you are older, you can come to Earth. You can see the mountains and the rivers and the snow that still falls in the winter. You can meet the dogs and cats and horses that we have made part of our families." The cubs did not understand her words, but they understood her voice. They understood her warmth. And they knew, deep in their small predator hearts, that this strange human female would keep her promise. Aileen stood up and walked toward the shuttle that would take her home. She did not look back. If she looked back, she would cry. And she was not ready to cry yet, but she held the memory stone close to her heart. And she smiled, because she knew that this was not an ending. This was a beginning. A new chapter in the long story of two species learning to understand each other, learning to trust each other, learning to love each other, Humanity had always been good at making friends with monsters. It was perhaps their greatest gift. And now, for the first time, the galaxy was beginning to understand just how powerful that gift could be. The Volith cubs would grow up strong and healthy. They would carry human warmth in their hearts. And when they had cubs of their own, they would tell stories about the strange creature who had held them when they were small and afraid. They would call her by the name that Roth had given her, a name that meant the one who makes warmth safe. They would call her Family Dot, and in the end, that was all that mattered. The dining hall of Harmony Ring was the largest room on the station. It had to be. 37 species needed to eat, and each one needed different things. The hall was divided into sections. Some sections had pools of warm water where the fish-like Sonari floated and ate tiny creatures. Some sections had darkness and heat where the Mordith absorbed minerals from glowing rocks. Some sections had sealed chambers filled with gases that would kill most other beings. The human section was simple. Metal tables, metal chairs, plain food that came from machines. Rice, bread, vegetables, and sometimes meat that did not taste quite right but was safe to eat. Aileen ate alone most days. She was not unfriendly, but she was quiet. She preferred to read while she ate. Translation files, mostly. Language patterns and cultural notes. The other humans thought she was shy. The truth was that she simply found aliens more interesting than small talk. Today, she sat at a small table near the edge of the human section. It was close to the main corridor that ran through the center of the dining hall. Sometimes, if she looked up from her reading, she could watch other species walking past. It was like visiting a zoo, except the animals could talk and had their own opinions. About humans. Her lunch was a bowl of rice with vegetables and a small cup of tea. The tea was cold because she kept forgetting to drink it. The vegetables were overcooked because the food machines did not understand Korean cooking. But Aileen did not mind. She was deep in her translation work, trying to understand a particularly difficult Velith phrase. The phrase was Kethnar Voth. It seemed to mean something like the warmth that makes sleep safe. But Aileen was not sure. The Velith language did not translate easily into human words. She did not notice the silence that fell over the dining hall. She did not notice the other species. Slowly turning to look at something behind her, she did not notice the three small shapes moving along the corridor, following a scent that none of the adults could identify. The first sign of trouble was a soft sound. A small chirp, like a bird asking a question. Aileen looked up from her screen. A Velith cub stood at her elbow. Its copper eyes were enormous in its small furry face. Its nose twitched as it sniffed the air around her. Its tiny claws clicked against the floor as it shifted its weight from paw to paw. "Oh," Aileen said softly. "Hello there." The dining hall went completely silent. Every species present stopped eating, stopped talking, stopped breathing. Hundreds of eyes turned toward the small table where a human female sat face to face with one of the most dangerous young creatures in the galaxy. The Velith adults at the far end of the hall rose from their seats. Their claws extended with a soft clicking sound. Their copper eyes blazed with alarm. Roth, their leader, took a step forward, then stopped. He did not know what to do. If he moved too fast, the cub might react with violence. If he moved too slow, the human might panic and trigger an attack. But Aileen did not panic. She did not scream. She did not run. She did not even stand up. She simply looked at the small creature beside her and smiled. "Are you lost?" she asked in a gentle voice. "Where is your family?" The cub chirped again. It stepped closer to her chair. Its small nose pressed against her arm, and it made a sound that was almost like a purr. Behind the first cub, two more appeared. They had followed the same path, tracked the same scent, arrived at the same destination. All three of them clustered around Eileen's chair like flowers turning toward the sun. Ambassador Kim stood frozen across the room. His chopsticks hung in the air, forgotten. His mouth was open, but no words came out. Yuna had her hand over her mouth. Her eyes were wide with fear. Junho looked like he might faint. The other species in the dining hall reacted in different ways. The Krath made clicking sounds of alarm. The Sonari splashed nervously in their pools. The Mordith simply watched with their ancient, patient eyes, and the Velith adults stood like statues, not knowing whether to attack, retreat, or pray. Aileen pushed her chair back slowly. The movement was smooth and calm, as natural as breathing. She looked down at the three cubs and did something that no one expected. She patted her lap. The first cub climbed onto her legs without hesitation. It curled into a ball on her thighs, pressed its small body against her stomach, and began to purr. The sound was deep and rumbling, like a small engine warming up. The second cub scrambled onto the table. It knocked over her water glass in its eagerness. Aileen caught the glass before it could spill, set it aside, and let the cub settle on the metal surface beside her plate. The third cub tried to climb her arm. Its small claws pricked through her sleeve, but she did not flinch. She simply helped it find a comfortable position on her shoulder, where it pressed its warm body against her neck and closed its copper eyes. Roth took another step forward. His voice came through his translator, rough and uncertain. "Human, what are you doing?" Aileen looked up at the massive predator. She was still smiling. Her hands moved gently, scratching behind the ears of the cub in her lap. "They seem cold," she said. "Your species runs hot, doesn't it?" "The station keeps things at a standard temperature that works for most species, but that must feel freezing to them." Roth blinked. He had not expected this answer. "And you a worm?" he asked. Aileen nodded. "Humans have a high body temperature compared to most oxygen breathers. We are like portable heaters, I suppose." These little ones probably sensed that from across the room. The dining hall remained silent. No one moved. No one spoke. They simply watched as this small human female sat with three deadly predator cubs climbing all over her, and she acted like it was the most normal thing in the world. "They could kill you," Roth said finally. "One bite, one claw. They are young. They do not have full control of their instincts." Aileen shrugged, being careful not to disturb the cub on her shoulder. "They are babies," she said. "They are not trying to hunt me. They are just cold and confused and looking for something warm and safe." She looked down at the cub in her lap. It had stopped purring and started making small snoring sounds. Its eyes were closed, and its tiny paws twitched as it dreamed. "See?" Aileen said softly. "They just wanted to sleep." Roth stared at her for a long moment. His scarred face showed an expression that none of the other species could read. Then, slowly, his claws retracted. His shoulders relaxed. He lowered his head in a gesture that might have been respect. "You are strange, human," he said. Aileen laughed quietly, trying not to wake the sleeping cubs. "I have been told that before." The Galactic Council met 3 days after the incident in the dining hall. Representatives from 20 species gathered in the great, circular chamber at the heart of Harmony Ring. The chamber had seats arranged in rising rows, like an ancient theater, with a central platform where speakers could address the crowd. Ambassador Kim stood on that platform now. He was nervous, but he did not show it. 15 years of diplomatic training had taught him how to hide his feelings behind a calm face. The topic of discussion was humanity. "We have reviewed the recordings," said the Kreth ambassador. Her voice was a series of clicks and buzzes that the translator turned into words. "We have analyzed the biological data. We have consulted our scientists and our historians. And we have reached a conclusion that troubles us deeply. Kim waited. He had learned that patience was the most valuable skill in alien diplomacy. Humans are not what we thought they were, the Kreth ambassador continued. We believed them to be weak, soft, fragile. Prey animals that somehow developed technology and spread across the stars. She paused, and her many eyes focused on Kim. We were wrong. A murmur ran through the chamber. The Sonari delegates splashed in their water tanks. The Mordith rumbled like distant thunder. The Kreth ambassador raised one of her clawed limbs. We have discovered that humans have pursued predators. They hunt by following their prey for hours, sometimes days, until the prey collapses from exhaustion. Their ancestors ran across the plains of their homeworld, chasing animals that were faster and stronger, simply refusing to stop until the chase was over. Kim nodded. That is correct. We call it persistence hunting. It is an ancient technique. Ancient, perhaps, but still present in your biology. The Kreth ambassador clicked her jaws. Your species can run for hours without rest. You can survive in extreme heat because your bodies cool themselves with water. You can keep going when other species would die. Another delegate spoke up. This one was a tall, thin being from a species called the Vorn. We have also learned that humans consume capsaicin, a chemical that causes pain and burning in most species. You eat it for pleasure. Kim smiled slightly. We call it spicy food. It is very popular on Earth. You eat pain, the Vorn said flatly. For fun. When you say it like that, it does sound strange. The chamber erupted in whispers and murmurs. Species that had ignored humans for years were now looking at them with new eyes. Some of those eyes showed fear. Some showed fascination. Some showed something that might have been respect. Roth stood up from his seat among the Velith delegation. His voice boomed across the chamber without need of a translator. I have something to add. The chamber went quiet. No one interrupted a Velith elder. Not if they wanted to keep their limbs attached. 3 days ago, my cubs escaped from their minders. They were cold, confused, and afraid. They wandered into a room full of strange species, any one of which might have seen them as a threat and attacked. He paused and looked directly at Kim. Instead, they found a human female. She did not run. She did not scream. She did not attack. She simply opened her arms and let my cubs climb onto her body. She kept them warm while they slept. She fed them from her own plate. She treated them like her own children. The Sonari ambassador made a bubbling sound. We have reports that human young regularly form bonds with predatory species from their homeworld. Dogs, cats, wolves. Creatures with teeth and claws that could kill them. Kim nodded. We call them pets. Or family members. We have been adopting dangerous animals for 100,000 years. It is part of our nature. Why? The question came from the Mordith delegation. Their voice was like rocks grinding together. Why would a prey species bond with predators? Kim thought carefully before answering. He knew that this moment was important. He knew that his words would be recorded and studied and analyzed by species across the galaxy. Because we are not prey, he said finally. We never were. We may not have claws or fangs or scales. We may not be fast or strong or armored. But we have something else. We have the ability to look at any creature, no matter how dangerous, and see the potential for friendship. He spread his hands wide. Humans do not survive by fighting. We survive by making alliances. With each other, with animals, with anyone who will stand beside us. We are not the strongest species in the galaxy, but we might be the most adaptable. We can make friends with anything, anywhere, under any circumstances. Roth stepped forward. I have lived for 120 years. I have fought in wars. I have killed enemies beyond counting. I have seen species rise and fall, and I have never seen anything like what that human female did for my cubs. His copper eyes swept across the chamber. She showed them kindness. Not because she had to. Not because she was afraid. Not because she wanted something in return. She showed them kindness simply because they were small and cold and needed help. He lowered his head slightly. That is not weakness. That is the most terrifying strength I have ever witnessed. Because it cannot be fought. It cannot be defeated. It can only be accepted. The chamber was silent for a long moment. Then the Kreth ambassador spoke again. We have a proposal. The Velith have suggested a partnership between their species and humanity. A program to raise Velith cubs in human homes. We believe this proposal has merit. She turned to face the full assembly. But more than that, we believe it is time to reconsider our relationship with the human species. They are not prey. They are not weak. They are something new. Something different. Something that the galaxy has never seen before. Her many eyes blinked in sequence. They are the species that makes friends with monsters. And in a universe full of monsters, that may be the most valuable talent of all. The vote was held immediately. 20 species raised their voices in agreement. For the first time in galactic history, humans were officially recognized as a major power. Not because of their weapons or their technology or their numbers, but because of something far more rare, their ability to love. Aileen watched the proceedings from a small screen in her room. She did not feel like a hero. She did not feel like she had changed the course of history. She just felt like a farm girl from Bizen who had done what came naturally. But when Roth's cubs came to visit her that evening, climbing onto her lap and pressing their warm bodies against hers, she smiled and held them close. "Welcome home," she whispered. The cubs purred in response. They did not understand her words, but they understood her warmth. And that was enough.